You will hear a number of different recordings and you have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a customer and a salesman at a car dealership. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example which has been done for you. On this occasion, only the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning. Please come in. How can I help you?
Well, I'm thinking of buying a new car, and I'm not sure what I really want. I think I need some advice.
Of course. Had you got any particular make in mind?
I'm interested in a saloon. I've had one before and really liked it, but I haven't decided if I want to drive a saloon again. I want to consider other options before I make a final decision.
The customer states that she is interested in the saloon, so saloon has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. Please come in. How can I help you?
Well, I'm thinking of buying a new car, and I'm not sure what I really want. I think I need some advice.
Of course. Had you got any particular make in mind?
I'm interested in a saloon. I've had one before and really liked it, but I haven't decided if I want to drive a saloon again. I want to consider other options before I make a final decision.
Sure, we've got various models. Let me ask a few more questions, so I understand what you are looking for.
Sure.
How many doors would you like? 2 doors or 4 doors?
The car I've got at the moment has 4 doors, but I never have any passengers. So, perhaps, 2 doors would be a little more compact and suit me better.
Well, I think the car you're looking for is called the Star Max. Here's a picture.
Great. Have you got one on the lot?
Yes, I'll take you to it for a look in a minute. I'll just ask you a few more questions before we take a look. What kind of transmission do you want? I presume you want automatic?
I can't drive a car with a manual transmission, so, yes, I'll need an automatic.
I understand. Have you given any thought to the color? Our blue model is very popular these days.
Yes, it's nice. But I would like something a little less common, like yellow or green.
Oh, that's interesting. We do have a green model available, but we don't have one in yellow.
Then, I would be interested in the green color, if it is light green.
Yes, it's light green.
Brilliant. I'll take the green one.
You might have to wait a week or so for that color, but I assume that'll be okay.
Oh yes, fine.
Are you ready to go see a model car?
Before we go, I would just like to ask you a few questions. How much is the car?
The cash price is going to be somewhere in the region of 15,000.
That's reasonable.
How would you like to pay?
Is it possible to pay by check?
Yes, no problem. And would you be interested in us taking your present car as parts exchange?
Yes, if it helps me to get some credit in my purchase of my new car.
It will. So I'll just need some details from you, and then we can go to take a look at the new car. and do an evaluation of your current car. Is that okay?
Yes.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Could I have your full name?
Jenny Evans.
And is that Mrs. Evans?
It's Doctor, actually.
Okay, and your address?
221 Green Road.
Is that green spelled as in the color?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Which city are you living in?
Brighton.
And do you know your postcode?
Let me see. It's BN1 2AE.
BN12AE.
That's correct.
Do you have a daytime number we can reach you at?
I work at the hospital. It can be difficult to reach me at times. I can give you a number just for messages and then I'll get back to you when I can. Is that okay?
That's fine.
It's 0277331642.
And about the car you have now, what make is it?
It's a Aleppo.
Do you know the year or the model?
I think it's 2008.
And what is the mileage, roughly?
I'm not sure. I know it's less than 90,000.
Okay. What color is it?
It's silver.
And one last thing. What sort of condition would you say it is in?
I'd probably describe it as reasonable. It does have a lot of rust on the bottom.
We can check that in a moment.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a man called James Murray talking on the radio about School Power, a UK charity which sends school supplies to people in developing countries. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
My name's James Murray and I'd like to talk about the important work of School Power, a large charity based primarily in London. School Power sends free school supplies around the world. We currently have donated necessary school supplies to over 5,000 schools in 43 different countries. But first, how we began. I initially got the idea of exporting school supplies to developing countries while I was in El Salvador. I went there in 1989, just after graduating from university. After 4 years of studying English literature, I needed to put down the books and find adventure. I loved traveling, so I decided to join a voluntary organization, and was sent to El Salvador to help build a well, in a small rural village. The project came to an end after 3 months. I kept moving on from one rural project to another in various Central American countries, and when I returned to the UK in 1992, I started planning school power. While living in these rural towns and villages scattered across Central America, I noticed a lot of children went to school without any backpack, books, or even a simple pencil case. A lot of these places had only one school, one teacher for all levels, and all clearly lacked any sort of proper school supplies. Without books or pencils, how can students take notes, review those notes, and do homework? It was obvious the lack of basic school supplies would impede any learning process. As school supplies is relatively cheap, I simply thought at that time that this issue could easily be solved. I spent the next few years setting up school power, and although we have achieved a lot, more needs to be done to supply classrooms around the world with essential equipment and school supplies to help teachers teach and students learn. At School Power, we collect or purchase mainly school supplies and sometimes equipment, like computers, and send the supplies to some of the poorest regions in the world. Of course, we also accept monetary donations, not just supplies. When we distribute school supplies overseas, we do have a primary condition that the local schools must follow. When we donate supplies to a school, all the supplies must be distributed equally among the children, and we will not tolerate any hoarding by any local community or school leaders. We do often check on schools to see if indeed they are honoring this condition. In addition to funding issues we currently have, I will talk about this in detail later, we encounter a lot of logistical problems. It can be complex to ship supplies from the UK around the world. Not every region is near a port, so it can sometimes take over 6 months to finally get the needed supplies to a school, even after it has arrived in the country, due to the lack of warehouse space, roads, delivery trucks, and so on. To reduce the time it takes for supplies to reach its destination, we do our best to buy the supplies locally, in the region, or in a neighboring country. Not only does this get the supplies to the classroom quickly, but it helps local economies. This has been so effective that some regions' local economies developed so well that they no longer need donations from us. Currently, our charity is facing dark times. In order to continue operating, we need to have a constant supply of school supplies which we send out every month from the UK or buy locally every quarter. Last June, we had a big scare as we ran out of money. We had containers of school supplies to ship out, but we did not have the ability to cover the shipping costs. It was a dreadful situation. We managed to get some extra funding through a fundraiser at the time, but since then, we are always barely paying our bills.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Fortunately, last month we won an innovation award, which will help us enormously. We plan to invest 20 of the £50,000 prize money to help secure our future. Winning the award helps raise our profile, and the money enables us to pay all our yearly shipping costs, which represents our greatest expense. But even with this extra money, we need more support. School Power changes entire communities. When a child gets a new backpack, notebook, and pencil from us, they will grow up with a better education, which leads to better employment opportunities, which leads to the entire community increasing their standard of living. As the global economy moves more online, a pencil and a sheet of paper are no longer the only tools a student needs to compete. We're currently looking to invest more in computers and internet access, so that all children have an opportunity to access and learn from the internet, and eventually take advantage of global opportunities. Because of our ongoing work, entire communities in a number of countries now have a better standard of living. So far, we've provided 5,000 schools with school supplies and equipment. But we would like to send to more schools, at least 8,000 by the end of the year. There are many ways in which you can support the work of School Power. Of course, we welcome any donations, or school supplies, and computers, even used, but we must strongly encourage more financial donations for us to properly help the world. Other than the logistic costs I mentioned before, we also need proper staff to help us with the entire operation of School Power. We currently have 20 full-time employees, 5 part-time employees, and a volunteer force of 250 people. But we are still severely understaffed. We are asking you to donate supplies, funds, and if possible, some of your time as a volunteer. Everything helps us to help the students in developing countries around the world. We hope that by talking on this radio program today, that this will raise public awareness, which will lead to government organizations also giving us regular financial support, something that we really need. If you'd like some more information about where to donate, or offer help in other ways, please contact us on our website.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear a professor and 2 students discussing a business case study. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hello David and Laura. Now I asked you to look at the case study for Crunch Candy, as part of your exam preparation. It's interesting because 2 years ago the company was facing many problems. I want you to discuss how they dealt with these problems. Let's start with you, Laura. Having read through the case study, can you just summarize what kind of problems Crunch Candy had to overcome?
Well, I did a lot of research to come up with the company failings at this time. What was obviously noticeable was that despite a great new advertising campaign, they were suffering from falling sales. To understand their sales decrease, let's consider the internal issues the company was having at the time. First, they had a massive ongoing expansion plan that was slowed down by a lack of staff. Second, due to the company's emerging vulnerabilities, the competition cut their prices and increased their marketing to aggressively steal market share from Crunch Candy. And finally, before Crunch Candy had a chance to get to grips with the effects of all of these issues, they were hit by a strike as the employees were asking for a 5% wage increase due to the increasing workload. Everything seemed to go wrong for Crunch Candy at the same time.
Yes, I think that's a great assessment of what happened to Crunch Candy. And David, now you contacted the company directly, didn't you? What did the company define as the reasons for these problems?
Well, I think Laura did a great job with her analysis, but she missed some very important issues that Crunch Candy was facing 2 years ago. It would be easy to say they had invested too heavily on expansion, but in fact, although there were labor issues, they solved those issues within a few weeks with all sides in agreement. According to Crunch Candy, what set them back was the high interest rates on their loans. This caused them to have lower margins, forcing them to have a price increase. Once the price tag went up, their sales went down. This is the point they started to lose market share from their competitors.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Let's explore what would have been best for Crunch Candy at the time. Laura, what do you think the company should have done to stave off falling sales?
In hindsight, it's clear that they should have immediately sold off their chocolate label, Jump Choco, as this was where they were losing the most money. And since then, Jump Choco has still been losing the company a lot of money yearly. With the capital from the sale of Jump Choco, they could have paid down their loans, alleviating some of the burden of high interest rates. With a reorganization effort, they could have cut brands that were losing money, and then could have focused more on improving the marketing of more profitable brands.
Jump Choco has been their most famous brand for over 30 years. That would have been too dramatic of a decision to make. You mustn't always assume that dramatic problems require dramatic solutions. Sometimes there's a simple fix, such as changing the guy at the top. I think Crunch Candy's real issues were with their management and how they were running things. Companies will always face problems, but it's the person in charge that have to always navigate a company safely through the difficult times. What do you think, David?
Perhaps you are being too tough on management. Keep in mind that Crunch Candy did get through these difficult times, albeit in not the best ways. I think if other similar-sized companies, in whatever industry, faced the same issues, they would have all gone under.
Good point. Now, what I want you to do is write a report about our discussion today. In this paper, I want you to take Crunch Candy and define exactly how they should have overcome their problems, and outline the reasons why you think so. Feel free to include other case studies, and how other companies dealt with similar issues. Right now, I would like to quickly discuss how Crunch Candy is doing now. Laura, what do you think of the current state of the company?
I've got great hopes for it. It has almost recovered completely from its dark times of the past. Their current advertising campaign is going strong, and they are very innovative with their products. They set new trends. The company's doing great. What do you think, David?
I'm not sure I agree. They are still facing labor shortages and have a difficult time of attracting more highly skilled workers, including upper management. For their recovery to be complete, they need to fix these workforce issues. When I was talking to the HR manager last week, he said to me that he thinks the company has got a great management team, but he did say that they will be aggressively scouting and recruiting new workers in the upcoming months.
Well, personally, I think there is no excuse to have the same problematic issues ongoing for years. There is a clear failure up at the top to resolve these problems. Until their labor issues are corrected, I think the company will continue to have sales and worker performance difficulties. Because of these reasons, I disagree with Laura about their recovery being almost complete. Thank you for the discussion. If you have any questions about the report that is due, please let me know.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a presentation given by a professor about architecture. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So far, we have been talking about the issues an architect has to consider when designing corporate buildings. We're now going to move on to discuss the design of public buildings, and I'll demonstrate this by using the recently constructed Newcastle Concert Hall as an example. When designing public buildings, the architect must firstly consider what the function of that particular building is, for example, office space, entertainment, education, transport, and so on. The second thing the architect has to think about is the building's context, which includes its physical location and its social meaning. One final thing to consider, especially for important public buildings, like a city hall or central train station, is to present a symbolic idea within the design, related to the building's proposed use. Let's look at the Newcastle Concert Hall in relation to these ideas. The location chosen was a site in a derelict area of the city. The site was occupied by a factory that had not been used for several years. The chosen site was quite a distance from the city's central business district and shopping centres, but it was within half a kilometre of the motorway. The location was surrounded to the north by a canal, which had once been used to transport raw materials to factories in the area. The architect chosen for the project was Brian Fisher. He found the location of the site to be his biggest challenge, as it was in an area that had no other buildings nearby. To signify the importance of a building in this quite rundown location, and a use that was yet unknown, he decided to create a building based around the idea of a mystery. So, how did he show this in the design of this building? Well, Fisher firstly decided to create access to the building for pedestrians by making use of the water that surrounded the site. While approaching the entrance to the building, people would have to cross over a bridge. He wanted to give people a feeling of suspense as they see the building for the first time. Following on with the theme of mystery, the building was designed in the shape of a box. The first side that people see is just a flat wall with no windows, which will lead the people approaching the building to wonder what is inside. Furthermore, the design of the flat wall serves a dual purpose. At night, it is used as a huge screen, onto which images are projected. The auditorium holds just over 1,000 people, and its floor is supported by 10 enormous pads. These pads are constructed from rubber, so they are able to absorb any sounds, or vibrations from outside, and prevent them from affecting the sound in the auditorium. The walls are made of several layers of thinly cut wood, sourced from local tree populations. In order to improve the acoustics within the building, the walls are not straight, they are curved. The acoustics in the hall can also be adjusted to suit the size of orchestra, or the type of music being played. In order to do this, 9 movable panels have been fitted to the ceiling, and these can be moved individually to alter the sound. The walls also have curtains which can be opened or closed to change the acoustics. Public opinion on the new building has mostly been positive. However, it does have its critics. In spite of Fisher's efforts to use local materials, they criticize the style of the design as being too international, and say it doesn't reflect the people it was built for.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the real test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. Please spend a few minutes to check your answers.